Now that we have made our 3 spheres, we have one more thing left to do, and that is we're going to add some text. We are going to add the word oils, chalk, and watercolor on these orbs so that they're labeled, and it gives us a chance to use the text tool. This is the text panel, which gives us a lot more text options, and you can find that under Window, Text. And the text tool is going to involve talking about vector paths. I want to point out a couple of things. I just accidentally made another layer, so I'm going to shut that off. I'm going to change my brush to oil brush so that I don't accidentally paint and cause a new layer to appear. But I do want to show you guys that with these grouped, you do have the possibility of grabbing your layer selector and moving an entire set of layers at one time. You could also grab 2 sets and move them at the same time by holding Shift or Control when you click both of those. I'm going to go ahead and reposition them just because I feel like it, and to show you that they can be repositioned before I put text on them. Again, you can position these any way that you would like. So we're going to start with text, and this involves these 4 paths involve these 4 tools, but we're going to use text, and text is a vector path. Now I'm going to go ahead and click and just start typing, and I'm going to type oils. Now you can see that for one, this isn't a very nice font, right? And it's not very clear either. And for 2, it's a weird color. It's actually red, and that's the color that I have in my palette, or in my brush right now. So if I choose another color, you can see that as I move around and I'm holding my pen tool down, I'm sampling different colors constantly, and I'm getting a different color. So I'm going to go with this bright red. And I'm also, while I have the layer selected, that's all I need to go ahead and pick something a little more interesting. I'm going to also bring my size up. This is that control here. When I'm in my text tool, I get contextual menus up here, which allow me to reset the text to its standard form, alter the size, justification, the text attributes and the shadow attributes, the color, the opacity, and the way it blends with other things, the composite method. And the same, add a drop shadow on the outside or a shadow on the inside to make it look recessed. So I have all these controls up here in this contextual menu, and I also have them in the text palette. But if you're getting a little palette heavy and you don't want those options hanging around, you don't have to have them. So I'm going to do an interior shadow with that, and I'm going to make that shadow a little bigger with this slider over here. I could also make it directional. If I click there, I could make that blur directional any way I want. I'm not going to do that. This is opacity, either for your shadows, what it's controlling right now, or if I click the other one, then the opacity is controlling the word itself. That just depends on which one of these 2 items I have clicked. Okay? And this again controls the outside shadow, inside shadow, font, size, justification. All of those symbols should look pretty familiar. This one right here is called tracking, and that one affects how much space there is between each of the letters. So you may want to play with that to make it look the way you want it to look, or leave it exactly where you, or leave it at 0, and that's its default. You can also add space between it and the line below it if for some reason you wanted to, or shorten that space if you wanted to. Now here's an interesting bit of activity, and that is you can change the curve style of your lettering. Right now it's on this one, which means every letter is straight up and down. If I do this, each letter is going to get a little bit curved. I'm going to change this slider here to change the center of where that, that's not going to help me. I'm going to grab the shape selection tool, and I'm going to alter this tiny pathway right here. And actually I'll go ahead and just make it smaller for the moment so that it looks a little more normal, right? So that you can see that it's turning around a shape and this other one will just cause them to turn around the shape of the bottom but not distort, and this top one will cause it to turn around the shape and distort. So with this shape selection tool, this allows us to grab any path, and this bottom piece is a path with 2 points and 2 handles, and these points connect the shape together, and the handles control how much that curves. And as you can see, it also controls how this shape, or the shapes of the words, are going to move along that line. So you can play with it until you get something that you want, and then keep it. Again, I can control out. Oh, I do not know what I just did. What did I just do? Somehow I just like picked up just the color and not the text. That is funky. Interesting. Okay. I'm going to bump up the size. Not that big. As you can see, the shape of your line doesn't change when you bump it up. So if you bump it up too much, you're actually changing the shape of what you made. I'm going to put it right on top of my thing like a little hat because I feel like it. I'm going to grab the text tool and I'm going to make another text. And when I do that, you see it pops up with a brand new item, and I can type in chalk, and I'm going to select that, and I'm going to make this one a different color again. Make it kind of purple. Can't really see the color because I have it selected, so I'm going to go ahead and grab just the layer selector, select just that layer, and then start changing my color. I'm actually going to make it blue. Oh, nah. I'm going to make it a light color like that, like gray. And once again, I can choose to make it bigger or smaller. I can choose to make it farther apart or transparent. And I can make it a little darker so that it shows up even when it's transparent. Looks pretty good. Make it a little closer together if I want to. And if I grab it from these handles, I can change the size of it, but if you notice, it's not changing my tracking or my height or anything like that. So I can change it in ways that that menu won't allow me to change it, and it's still somewhat editable by these items, but keep in mind that you may have distorted it in a weird way. And I make it just this interesting thing that definitely makes that word look weird. Last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and make smaller. I'm going to, a watercolor label. I'm going to pull it out so I can see where I'm typing. Water color. Okay. I'm going to make this, I'm going to grab this tool so I can color the whole thing at the same time. I'm going to make a light blue. I don't really have the blue I want, so I'm going to mix something over here. White. And that color. Bright blue. And then I'm going to pick it. Oh, I'm changing the wrong one. See how I'm on the chalk layer? Wanted that to be that dark gray color. Okay. Well, I'm going to make sure I'm on the watercolor layer, and then I'm going to pick this light blue. And now what I'm going to do is I want to make it wavy. Okay? I'm going to make it do some sort of like wavy path here. So if I go ahead and go over here and choose my curve style and say that I want it to be very wavy like that, and I want to make the whole thing wave, and then I grab my path selection tool and I go ahead and start making it do at least one wave. So I'm going to make it twist, a little more normal, and I'm going to make it really curve. Well, this isn't quite enough waviness for me. I really like how this W is kind of flopping out into nowhere, but I kind of want it to do more. But I don't have any more handles to play with. Well, what can I do? I can actually make more handles. This pen tool is a drawing tool that you can use in order to make vector paths. And this, if you click and hold, has other options, one of which is an add tool. And now if I click on this path that already exists, I'm going to add a point right there. So I'm going to go back to the selecting moving tool, and I'm going to extend this point out to about here, extend this point over to about here, and I'm going to grab these handles and pull so we get a nice smooth curve, and then come down here and pull so I get again a nice smooth curve. But I want it to continue. I want it to curve again all the way through there. So I need to move this point to the end of where I want that curve to be. Curve up. And I want it to curve again in here. So I'm going to go back, grab my plus tool, click on it, go back, grab my selection tool, and pull it down. And I want it to curve like that. I don't quite want my R to be so cut off, but I do want it to smush stuff a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's doing it on the color. And I'm going to move my line down until it smushes where I want it to smush and not where I don't want it to smush. And let it really push and pull my word until it looks really cool. Right? Now you notice that it's only working on the things that it's affecting the curve, right? It's not actually affecting very much the items that are free from the curve. The O and the R, the ones that are free of the line, really aren't being affected by the line, which means that maybe I even want to add more line like that so that they'll be affected. I can pull this back. There we go. Now the O and R are pinching at the top, and it's sharing this pinching effect. And I like the way that looks. I'm going to hit this button, especially so I can see it. I'm going to add a drop shadow on this one, and I'm going to bring the opacity of that drop center shadow way down, because that was way too obvious, right? No drop shadow, way too much drop shadow. It's more of a lining, and then that's just a nice soft drop shadow there. So that, looks interesting to me. I'm going to make it, this will blur the entire text, not just the drop shadow. Oh, that's because I have right here that it's set to blur the text, not the drop shadow. I'm going to move it over to the drop shadow, and I'm going to blur that drop shadow out a little bit and make it a little bit more opaque, and then blur it out. And that's all just because I want to. You should play with all these settings and figure out what you want it to look like. Last but certainly not least, you should go ahead and add your name. If you can't see where you're typing, you can look inside the layers panel so that you can tell that you're typing in the right place. And I'm going to bring my font down a little bit. And I'm going to make it a different color. And I'm going to reposition it into a place that makes a little bit more sense. And then I'm going to zoom out and take a look at my whole piece of paper. Honestly, I think I should put it up here because there's nothing up here. Alrighty, I think so that's how to use text. You can also subtract a point and control it with this guy, and you can draw independent line work with that guy. We might get to that later, but that's about as much of the vector artwork knowledge you're going to need to be able to manipulate your text around and make really cool shapes and curves. From something very complicated to very simple to just plain text. Thank you.